Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to announce the first episode of Legal Legends Podcast. My name is Rudy Rodriguez Shoma, and I am the founder of Legal Legends Podcast. I'm also vice president of strategic development for Synergy. I work with lawyers day and night, and I've had the privilege of knowing my first guest. I'm honored to have him on this podcast. He's been a great connector for me in the personal injury space, and I'm greatly appreciative of him. There, you don't really need. The introduction for this individual speaks for itself. He has his own law firm. He has worked on multi-million-dollar cases. He's an expert in the field, and he has a heck of a background and I want him to talk about his background and what brought him to this point to where he is one of the top lawyers in Florida, in the nation. I welcome onto this first podcast, Legal Legends Podcast, because he is already a legal legend, Josiah Graham, the owner and founder of Graham Injury Firm. Josiah, I thank you for jumping on with me today. It's an honor to have you on here, the first podcast, and hopefully many more for many other attorneys, but you're the first. So I thank you, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, I appreciate you for having me, man. The honor is all mine, and thank you for the warm introduction. And congrats on the podcast. I know it's going to be a success. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm really honored that you have me on as your first guest. So I'm looking forward to it, bro. I really am.
So I'm gonna jump right in, man. I mean, your story is different than most lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yep.
my father was a lawyer, a judge. I've known you since, gosh, I think just after you graduated law school, when I was at Fine Law, you were
Yep.
at the state attorney's office.
Yep.
That was like 8 years ago, 8 years ago,
Yeah.
and your career trajectory has gone like this. I mean, I'm to be real, I'm very proud of you, of your accomplishments for you. I'm very happy for you. I remember when we went to a couple of Heat games, and we were chatting it up about where I was, where you were, and I knew you were gonna crush it, and you have.
Thank you.
Talk about your father is from Jamaica.
Yep.
You were born here, right?
Yeah. So I was born here. I was born in a neighborhood called Melrose Park, which is in Fort Lauderdale. So like sort of a rough area or whatever. So my story starts at, I would say, at 7 years old is when, really where it starts for me, what I remember. My older brother, he was 12. He after years of being bullied in elementary school for being overweight, he took his life. He committed suicide. And at 12 years old, he hung himself. That was my introduction and my first experience with mourning a loss and suffering grief and meeting tragedy. And it also caused me to rebel, to lash out, because this was my big brother. And, we had a great bond. And I would look for this big brother, feeling and mentor in the wrong places. So I started hanging out with the big brothers in the neighborhood, committing crimes and whatnot, up until I was 12 years old when I was arrested for committing a crime, for breaking into a building, burglary. So when I did that, I was still a good student at school, still getting on an honor roll, but just doing dumb stuff out with the guys. And when I got arrested, I was fortunate. I was granted an opportunity to go into a diversion program where they divert you out the criminal justice system and try to, get you on the right track. And if you complete some set of conditions, your record is, not sealed but they drop the charges essentially. And that's what happened. In this diversion program, in this teen court program, I met this judge, and this judge really lit a fire under me and talked about how bright I was, the future I could have, and how I needed to make a fundamental change at that moment. And in that moment, I decided that day I wanted to be like that judge. I wanted to become an attorney. And that's what changed my life, man. And that's what changed my life. I literally set on my path to become an attorney, did everything that I had to do. In fact, I even majored in pre-law when I went to UCF. And, I went to UCF, and I got my master's degree. And then I went to law school. And then I got my master's degree. And then I went to law school. And then I got my master's degree. 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 And then I I then went to law school at FSU, joined the mock trial team. And then my first job out of law school was at the office that granted me diversion like 12 or 13 years before, which was at the state attorney's office in Broward County. So I worked there for 2 years at the state attorney's office and had like that full circle moment of being given diversion, being, almost being prosecuted by the office, to now starting in their juvenile division. So that's my story of becoming a lawyer.
So, I mean, but in between that time of 7, I mean, I can't imagine being a 7-year-old and seeing your brother like this. You have, your father is a pastor.
My
correct?
dad's a pastor, so he's from Jamaica. Pentecostal pastor, one of those, to catch the Holy Ghost and jump up and down, and you catch the Spirit and they touch you, you fall. That type of pastor, yes.
Yeah, I remember when you got your Range Rover and he prayed over your car, and I think I sent you a text message saying, please don't scratch the car with the keys that are in your hand right now.
Yeah,
the first scratch on any car is like, oh God,
absolutely. It's funny. I was my wife and I were going through my what is it, like your stories, your highlights on your archives. And I saw that video today and we laughed, how he prayed over my car. And it's just, he's an interesting man.
What was it like though? Obviously those 5 years.
Yeah.
7 and 12. I mean, your father's a pastor, and my father's from Cuba. I know strict household, but clearly you were at that moment probably lost because that's my guess. When we talk about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So during that moment, I was searching for meaning, searching for an identity, searching for inclusivity, and just wanted to be, loved, and wanted to be, be looked at as cool and all that stuff. And in my neighborhood, the way you did that was by doing the wrong things. And, and I was just a lost child at that point. I had a great household. I had a great upbringing. I had great parents. But, sometimes even with the best parents, if you're in the wrong community, you can have that outside pressure just pulling and tugging on you. And that's what happened. I was fortunate, though. Like I said, breaking into vehicles, breaking into different places, getting into a lot of fights, smoking weed, and, skipping school, being a wannabe thug type of person. That was me. But I was blessed that I still, in spite of doing all that, in the midst of doing all that, I realized this wasn't going to be me. So I always had a backup plan. Like, yeah, I'm doing all this now, but I got a future. So I would still pay attention in school. I would still get, straight A's sometimes, or at least always be on the honor roll. Yeah. So in the back of my mind, I think I knew that I wasn't destined for that. My dad would always speak life into me. So he's extremely religious, right? So he would just indoctrinate me with, son, you're destined to be great. You're going places. This is not you. And so when I made that change at 12, it was a little easy to make that. It was easy to make that change. Now, was it perfect? Was I at 12? Did I just become this, this saint, this choir boy? No, that's not how it happened. But at least I realized that the significant, crimes and the bad things that I was doing, that came to an end at that point.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, when I was 19, I got arrested for doing dumb stuff. Mm-hmm. Some people don't know that. Some people do. My father made sure he told everybody that when he would introduce me. So this is my dumb ass son who just stole gasoline from a gas station in Tallahassee at Florida State.
How'd you do that?
Back in 1997, you could pump gas and I'm telling the world this story so y'all can laugh at me now. But I went back in Tallahassee, you could pump gas before you paid.
Oh, I've heard of those ancient gas. I think they still got some of those in some states. I hear.
Yeah, so they had that in Tallahassee, and look, this wasn't the first time. You don't get caught the first time.
Yeah,
and you're a dumb old college student, and you've got $5 in your pocket, and that's to have Guthrie's, and or heck, if you actually pay in advance and then walk out and pump and then like, oh damn, I've gone $5 over, I don't have any more money left, drop the pump on the ground and drive off. Well, I mean, I was with a group of people and we got caught one time, and
I
that
bet.
was that one time we
Yeah.
got caught in Live
Uh-huh.
Oak, Florida,
Yep.
up in the Panhandle, going back from
Yep.
Thanksgiving break.
Yep.
We got caught, pulled over by FHP on I-10, and then I sat in a jail cell, and that was the worst experience of my life. And I'm 19, and I'm like, what the hell did I just do?
Yeah.
What did I just do? And not wanting to call my father, I didn't call my father. I called my aunt.
Mm.
I called everybody. You also find out when you look through your book back to 97
Mm-hmm.
who your friends are.
Yeah.
Call
Yeah.
everybody. Can't get anyone
Yep.
to even answer the phone because it's Suwannee County collect call or whatever.
Yep.
And you can't, no one's, or they're hanging up, or I don't have any money. Mind you, bond is $250. But $250 in 1997 for a 19-year-old, like,
Yeah.
and so my aunt bails me out, and my dad's a legislator in Tallahassee.
Mm.
So this story, I mean, obviously, it resonates with me. Like, people think that you're coming from a good family, but sometimes we make decisions, and you obviously had a traumatic experience
Yeah.
that brought you there. I
Yep.
was just a big dummy,
Yep.
realistically.
Yep.
But you become an attorney. You go to Florida State. You become an attorney. You've been an attorney since 2025.
Yep.
Was it in the cards that you wanted to be a prosecutor at that? I'm sorry, 2015. 2015.
Yeah. So
You're going on 10 years on March 23rd, I saw.
yeah. In 2 months, I'll be 10 years in.
Funny story. I crossed Phi Beta Sigma fraternity March 23rd, 1997.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So March 23rd is a great day.
Okay. Hey,
Was it in the cards that you were going to be a prosecutor from when that stuff happened and when you were 12?
No, just the opposite, actually. So
Really? Okay.
So I always wanted to be like Johnny Cochran. I wanted to be the biggest criminal defense lawyer that South Florida had ever seen, and I truly believe that I really could have been that person. Because I have strong roots in the Fort Lauderdale community, and a lot of my current clients, my shooting victim clients, stem from this community and are because a lot of the shootings happen in Fort Lauderdale and Lauderhill, so this community. So my plan was to come back and represent them, when they're facing criminal charges. But when I went to law school and I was telling others of this plan, and my trial law professor, who happened to be a criminal defense lawyer up in Tallahassee, his name was Torrey Friedman, and talking to him and his partner, he convinced me. He said, listen, some of the best trial lawyers, the best criminal defense attorneys start off at the prosecutor's office. They get their feet wet, they get experience, or at the public defender's office. So my plan was to join the state attorney's office in Broward County, get my feet wet, learn the ropes about how they prosecute cases, so I could be the best criminal defense attorney that South Florida's ever seen. That was my plan. And when I was a prosecutor working on those cases, I enjoyed it. But then when I would see the lives of criminal defense attorneys, and when I would see the type of cases they worked on, their lifestyle, how much they made, all those different things, I wasn't really drawn to it as much. I started seeing, civil lawyers, and I started hearing about these, big firms like Kelley, Uustal, and Haggard, and and Skip Campbell's, and when I realized what I really wanted to be, when I looked up to Johnny Cochran, was, a trial lawyer, someone in trial, and a great orator, a great speaker. And I always assumed that you had to be a criminal defense attorney to have that reputation. Then I started realizing that no, some of the best trial lawyers are actually on the civil side. And I had an opportunity to then meet Bob Kelley and John Uustal, and these are trial lawyers in Broward County who's handled huge mega cases against some of the biggest international companies, against General Motors, and $300 million verdict against Philip Morris and RJ Reynolds Tobacco. So, I met them and I told them my story and how I wanted to be like them, and how I wanted to learn from them. And eventually they granted me the opportunity to work for them. So I began working for Kelley Uustal in 2017. So I was a prosecutor for 2 years, from 2015 to 2017. May 1st, 2017, I began working at Kelley Uustal, and I learned the ropes. I did personal injury, medical malpractice, tobacco, negligent security, nursing home abuse. I did it all. And I was in the trenches for 5 years at Kelley Uustal. And that's where I put in my work.
So the work at Kelley Uustal, I know in between, either right at the beginning of Kelley Uustal, or was it right before you started, or right in the first few months, you were on The Bachelorette.
Hey, that's an interesting story. So
let's talk about that, because you're on The Bachelorette.
I kind of skipped right over that. I'm like, how did I miss that? Right. So I was at the state attorney's office, and in sometime in, I want to say maybe late 2016 or early 2017, I'm having lunch downtown Fort Lauderdale. It's a restaurant that they used to have there called Grill 401, which is right next to YOLO. I'm there with some of my buddies, and we're having lunch, and this middle-aged white woman walks up to our table, and I'm dressed, I'm in a suit. I'm at the state attorney's office, right? And she goes, she comes up to me and says, "Hey, my name is so-and-so. Are you single?" I'm like, I don't know if she's trying to hit on me. I don't know what's going on, right? But I tell her I'm single, and I'm just having lunch. And I like to brag about this story because she asked me, and even though I was with other guys there, so obviously she was drawn to me. You know what I mean? She was choosing, right? So she purposely avoided them, came to me. I was with my friend Quentin Morgan, and I want to say it was Harold Pryor. I don't remember. I think it was Harold. But
Harold Pryor, the state attorney for Broward County.
Yeah, yes, sir. So in any event, she says, I say, yeah. I say, why? Why, you ask? She says, well, I am a producer on the show called The Bachelor. And, we're looking for eligible bachelors to come onto the show. And, would you be interested? And I said, sure. She gave me her card and told me to text her. In that way, she would stay in contact with me. I remember putting in her number and texting her, and I was one digit off. I didn't even realize it. But about an hour later, right before I was about to leave, she comes back to my table and says, "Hey, you didn't text me." I said, "Yeah, you did." I show her my phone. She goes, "No, that's the wrong number." So I always look back at this and say, man, I was this close to not getting on television. But let me speed up. So after that, I want to say within a week of that meeting, I had a Zoom interview with her and others from the franchise. They come down to Fort Lauderdale, and they have a headquarters. Usually they have castings at the Riverside Hotel. I didn't realize that's what they were doing during that time. I had an interview on Zoom about a week later. 2 to 3 weeks after that, they flew me to LA for another meeting with probably 30 different producers. And then within a few months, I'm in LA at the Bachelor Mansion, and we're filming on season 13 of The Bachelorette with Rachel Lindsay, who was the first Black Bachelorette, the first Black lead in the Bachelor franchise. So crazy story.
Could you have ever envisioned, had you ever seen The Bachelor or The Bachelor? Was that the first Bachelorette?
I saw it in passing. I had never watched a full episode, but you're scrolling through TV, you see something on ABC. I always thought it looked interesting, but it wasn't really my type of show. But no, not in a million years would I've ever thought that I would be on The Bachelorette. Funny story. So when the lady came up to me and told me about The Bachelor, I was so naive. So I thought she wanted me to be the main guy.
Oh,
yeah. So I'm like,
that would have been the better one, right?
That would have been a better one. And that's The Bachelor. So I ended up. So then it's funny. So when they called me in a few weeks to interview for The Bachelorette, I said, "Oh no, sorry, there's been a misunderstanding, a mistake. You guys want me to be The Bachelor?" And they thought it was so funny. They said, "Listen, perhaps at some point, but how it usually works is you start off on The Bachelorette. If you don't make it all the way to the very end, chances are you become the lead to be the Bachelor in the following season." So, but that didn't happen for me. I had a great experience. got to meet Rachel, got to meet a lot of contestants who I remain close with, or at least cool with today. I'm cool with Brian, who won, who ended up getting married. Him and Rachel, they actually just got a divorce. We're sad to hear. It's just that's all the news. But Eric, Demario, Iggy, Diggy, Will, all
you
of
were on
those.
the one with the wrestler, right?
The wrestler, yes, Kenny.
Yeah.
Kenny, yeah, man. So we had it was a really fun experience. I got to go skiing for the first time. Learn to ski by going on The Bachelor. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
we went up to, was it Vermont to go ski? We also went to Hilton Head in South Carolina. I even flew to Norway. That's where I got kicked off the show in the freaking freezing cold. I had to take a flight for like 4 a.m. back to Fort Lauderdale, like a 14-hour flight after having drinking, getting no sleep, and they put you in the back in economy on a 14-hour. It was brutal.
Do you find that when you're on that show, they start like almost typecasting you as like a heel almost, or like
yeah. They kind of feel
they kind of make you look like a certain arrarront level on the show, or some guys are more humble and whatever.
Yeah. I was certainly the jerk. I was certainly I was the comedian, the funny guy, which was good. But then I was also the cocky guy, because now we joke and do some cocky stuff, and they played that up, and it is what it is. I'm not mad at it because I tell people the story. It's because of that show why I landed my first $1 million case.
I was going to go into that, yeah.
Yeah, because I was on that show. So when I started working at Kelley Uustal, we're downtown Fort Lauderdale, right? And there's a Publix right by the courthouse where I used to shop because I live downtown. And I'm shopping at that Publix right on Andrews and right there by the courthouse. And I'm shopping there. And an older black woman right off the show, she comes up to me and goes, "I know you. I know who you are." Like, you don't know me. You know what I mean? Like, who? She goes, "You know where I know you from." I laugh and I say, "Yes, The Bachelor, of course." And we just have a conversation. In the conversation, she tells me that she's shopping for her best friend, buying food and groceries because her best friend's daughter was just killed in a car accident, like 3 days before. Mm-hmm. She had no idea I did personal injury car accidents. What she knew me from was being a prosecutor from The Bachelorette. I tell her what I do. She goes, "Oh my God, can you come speak to my best friend and her family?" And I say, "Absolutely." I've never signed up a case at this time. I've only been a personal injury lawyer, maybe less than 3 months for sure. Want to say just a month or two. So I drive to her apartment in Lauderhill, Florida. I stop by my office. I get a retainer package. And I meet with the mom and the family. It's probably 30 people in a very small apartment in Lauderhill. I console them, I counsel them. I discuss the case with them. I sign the case up. The very next day, I open to make a claim with the insurance company, Geico. I tell them, "Hey, I represent this client. This person was killed, da, 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 da." On that phone call, the insurance adjuster tells me, "Well, there is a $300,000 policy, Mr. Graham, and there's also a $1 million umbrella policy, and we're going to pay it." So within 48 hours, maybe 72 hours, I settled the case for $1.3 million just because this lady recognized me at the grocery store. Wow. So that is the power of media. That is the power of, people knowing you. That's why I preach time and time again to, post on social media. In this day and age, you got to be if you have some type of brand, if you have some company, if you have a law firm, you got to be on social media. And that's why I preach that every day. But yeah, that was my very first case.
That's wild. I remember when we went to I saw you at, we went to El Camino on Las Olas, and we're in and these two older white women say, "I know, can we get a picture?" I'll never forget that. No, I can only imagine that being on that show. I mean, it's publicity, and
absolutely.
And you have, is this the one where it's a 70-year-old mother who lost her 50-year-old daughter?
Exactly. It was. How did you remember that? Oh my!
I'm reading your website.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I have it on. It's on your results.
She was like 72 years old. Her daughter was probably 50 or 55. Her daughter was a lesbian, unmarried, no other kids. And it's really rare that you see a settlement that big for an adult, and
Yeah, with no children.
for an adult with no children, right? For a 70-something plus year old woman whose daughter was in her 50s, but they paid it, did the right thing, and I think her mom was satisfied with the result.
Would you say now that you're more experienced, because obviously you were a month, 2, 3 months in, now that you look back and say, well, they had an umbrella policy of $1 million. This person must be well off. They didn't want to have you going after assets type of situation.
Absolutely. And I found that
Would you
out.
say that?
I knew that back then. So it didn't take much experience. So I found out that this guy owned, it was several jewelry stores that this gentleman owned.
Okay.
He owned several jewelry stores, and he was an older gentleman as well, and he owned several jewelry stores, and of course, if there's a $1 million policy, you take that. You don't try to go after someone's personal assets, because they can file for bankruptcy, they can have a homestead exemption on their home. There is no guarantee. They could put their funds. It could be in their spouse's name. You don't turn down $1.3 million on a car accident.
The experience at Kelley Uustal you mentioned. You're working at one of the premier law firms in personal injury in South Florida. Nationally, they had the case with Flow Rider recently that I saw was affirmed. I don't know how much he's going to collect off that, but it's going to be, I'm sure, in the multi-millions off that case. I'm looking at the different cases that you have just on your website. And cases I know that you've done in the past, like that experience. Did you expect at some point to go on your own, or
so I always knew.
Okay.
So I always wanted to go on my own. So that's for sure. I've always wanted to have my own firm, but sometimes, especially with youth, you have that, you lack some confidence, right? When you're immature.
That was what I was going to ask you.
So I didn't always have that confidence. I knew I had the skill set, right? I had won several national competitions in mock trial, won best advocate, many times. So I was always been a great orator and a good speaker on my feet, but I didn't know, once I started working for Kelley Uustal and seeing these prominent lawyers, you kind of feel intimidated in a sense. You feel, oh my goodness, can you be as good? The more I worked there, the more I realized that I deserved and I belonged to be there. And I started honing my skill set, but not just by, being an orator, but being a better writer, taking better depositions, searching for the truth, looking through discovery. And when I honed my skills there, the more I started working and the more cases I started bringing in, I started realizing I can do this. I can do this on my own, because it's one thing. What I can tell you, working at a big firm, it gives you that comfort. You have that safety net. You can take on big cases. It's not your money you're spending. You can hire this expert, freely without saying, oh my God, what if we don't win? When you're on your own, you're putting it up. You're putting up that money, so it's a much bigger gamble. So I certainly wanted to wait until I had a big cushion, a big safety net, a big war chest of money that I had accumulated, and a bunch of knowledge that I had accumulated over time. But I certainly wanted to wait until I had that, and after 5 years, I figured that I had that experience.
You've had cases with celebrities as well. You had a case with Prime 112 against the babies.
Absolutely.
You had a case in Miami Gardens at the French Montana. There was a video, correct? And the guy got shot was it French Montana?
Yeah, there was a case against French Montana. There was a video shoot where my client was shot. Several people were shot. That case has subsequently resolved. But yeah, we did have a case against French Montana among many other defendants for that video shoot. That is correct. So, and
talk about these cases when that.
So I'm not allowed to go into the French Montana case, but what I can tell you about is, I had, members of the baby's entourage or Prime 112. So the baby and his camp were, my client was at Prime 112 dining, and as he was leaving and getting into a vehicle, some type of commotion erupted between him, his friends, and a group from the rapper DaBaby's entourage. My client was assaulted and eventually was shot in the leg. Another person was shot in the neck and is now a quadriplegic. Yes. So both cases successfully resolved for millions and millions of dollars against Prime 112 and other carriers. But that was an unfortunate situation. It happened on Memorial Day weekend. I want to say this was 2022 when this happened, or 21, one of those years. I think it was 2021 when this happened.
So when did what you started your firm in January 21 or January 22?
January 22. So I opened my firm in January 22. So I was with Kelley Uustal from May 1st, 2017 up until January of 2022. I left maybe end of January, top of February in 2022. And I opened my own firm, Graham Injury Firm.
So we're going on, this is your 3-year anniversary.
I'm 3 years. Yeah, I'm 3 years in now. 3 years on my own this month.
When you look at these last 3 years and you look at where you were then, where you are now, do you sit? I know you in this field you cannot ever rest on laurels, but do you ever sit back and take a breath and say, "Man, I did it"?
So yeah, I do, and
because you have to enjoy.
Of course, and I have those moments, man, and it's different. It's usually like if I'm walking around my house, right, or just with my wife and seeing my kid play, or my in-laws or my family over. I'm just realizing that the life I'm creating for my son. And I look at
someone's cooking right now in the background.
Yeah, it's my father-in-law cooking over there. So, but no, I certainly take the time to appreciate, because you have to, man. You could be stuck in the grind every day and not realize what you're doing it for, and don't take a step back and time to reflect and just appreciate. So that's something I take the time. I'm intentional about, and I was talking to my wife about that. Buying the house from, LaShawn Shady McCoy, buying a house from him was just like a moment where I'm like, man, you can take a step back and appreciate this, Josiah. So that was
have your basketball skills improved since you got the hoop?
Yeah, I'm a better shooter now that there's a basketball court in the backyard, and you can't have a basketball court and not at least be a decent shooter. So. Now I've been practicing.
I mean, when you look at I think when you look at a home like the one that you purchased was a year and a half ago or so.
Yeah, exactly a year ago. So I moved in here January 2nd of 20.
That's right. I remember we were talking about it when you were looking for homes last fall, and it was like one after the other is falling through, and it's like, oh, this? I remember our conversations. It was like, is this gonna happen? Like, what's and then when's it gonna happen?
And it was the perfect house, man, because I looked at maybe 3 other houses. I was under contract for 2 other houses, and it didn't go through. One was my decision. The first house, I had buyer's remorse after I signed the contract. Then it was just like, I wasn't in love with it. I realized I was in love with the pool and the backyard. I was loving the backyard. I was obsessed with the backyard. But then I realized, the house just wasn't for me. The second house I actually did want at the time. I thank God it fell through. The guy I was buying it for, unfortunately, didn't disclose that there was a lien on that house. Well, that came up through title search after we had already, signed on the dotted line. We have this date where we're supposed to, move in and all these things, and then we realized he just didn't have clear title. I mean, the guy was upside down. He had 2 mortgages. The guy, he was living beyond his means. The guy had a Phantom a Rolls Royce Phantom, a Ferrari, that got repossessed, and 2 more. I don't know what he was thinking, but essentially the bank came back and took that house. And I'm so glad that it fell through, because this house is, 10 times better. I would have been sad if I was in that house and then I saw this house come. I think this house came on the market maybe 2 weeks later. Okay. And it was like, yo, this is God.
That was your dad, man.
That was my dad. That was he's a prayer warrior, so it was my dad for sure.
I mean, you're very involved in I know you take any type of injury party
Yep.
situation. I mean, I know medical malpractice is probably the one that's you have to be most careful of because
Yep.
of the
Yep.
costs into them. But
Mm-hmm.
accident cases. But an area that I know you've hit on hard is negligent security.
Yep.
How did you become this expert in negligent security? And obviously, I know you have had friends that are clients and so forth. Talk about that, and then seeing some of these friends that have gone through some of these things, obviously,
Yeah.
or I mean, because some
No.
of them have
No.
passed away, correct? Some of them have passed
Sure.
away.
Sure. So good question. Um, so I had never, growing up where I grew up, I didn't even know that if you're shot or killed on someone's property due to that property owner being negligent and not having adequate security, like if you're in some project and there's a bunch of shootings that happen there, or if you're at the club and they fail to pat someone down and that person enters with a gun and kills someone, I didn't know there was a civil recourse. Obviously, I know people could go to jail, but I certainly didn't know that there was a lot of claims that were not pursued just based out of ignorance. So when I was working at Kelley Uustal, I started hearing about a lot of these cases. Someone shot and killed at an apartment complex, or at a club, or at a bar, or at a strip club, or at a video shoot. And it was in I want to say 2018. It was a Father's Day in 2018 when my friend, I want to say it was either 2018 or 2019. I'm mixing up the years, but it was certainly Father's Day. And my childhood friend, we call him JD. His name is Jeffrey Brown, but he went by JD, D as in Delta. He was shot and killed on Father's Day after spending the day out with his kids on the Fort Lauderdale beach. He was shot right outside of his own apartment at the Circle One apartment in Lauderhill. It's a war zone over there. Several murders, shootings, assaults, burglaries, drug dealing just happened. It's like the epicenter for crime, in the epicenter for different murders in all of Broward County. And his family came to me, and they're grieving. And I had never taken on a negligent security case before. So what I did was I certainly signed the case up, and I taught myself negligent security. I reached out to another lawyer who had done negligent security before, and I had gotten a sample lawsuit. I reached out and I looked on the docket for different lawyers who did different cases, and I pulled transcripts from depositions. I pulled discovery. I pulled motions, responses to motions for summary judgment. I taught myself the ins and outs of negligent security. Because that was my first case, a lot of people get comfortable after they do a lot of cases, and with that comfort, sometimes they get a little lazy, right? And they don't do a lot of the internal digging and the searching for the truth. But that was my first case, so I felt like I had to do everything. So instead of sending an investigator to the crime scene, I went myself. I interviewed people, neighbors. I looked and I saw that where decoy cameras were positioned. I went there and I saw that the fence was broken, and where there should be a fence, an entry fence with a guard gate that goes up and down, I think it was just broken. I realized there was an abandoned guardhouse that was just closed. It had like trash in there. And I worked on this case day and night for about a year and a half, and we ultimately settled for a $2 million policy, the policy limit against two different defendants. And it's life changing money for his kids.
Yeah.
It's protected, it's secured. They have this structured settlement that's going to pay out when they become adults. But that's the case that I am probably the most proud of, because that family trusted me. Right, this is a child friend of mine. They come to the lawyer from the neighborhood. They trust me with it, and ever since then, I've been working on dozens and dozens of negligent security cases since then. That was the first one. We hit it out the gate, but it was a really successful story, and I'm glad that we were able to bring some level of comfort to his family.
When you look at cases like that now, because now you've done a number of them. When you look at that now, and you let's say you see it at a shopping plaza or an apartment complex or what have you, and you see these, maybe you have an investigator go out. And I don't know. I'm sure you still go out at
I
some of
still
them.
go out as
Oh,
well.
yeah, yeah. But when you see some of these things at these complexes where it's known for drug dealing, known for crime, known for everything that can possibly happen, and you see there's no security guard, there's no cameras, their lighting is bad. When you see this, are you sitting here saying, what are these people thinking about?
Yeah, all the time, all the time. And let me tell you something that's going to even shock you and blow your mind. What the thing that trips me up is that even after they're hit with these big, lawsuits and they pay out, you would think that they would make some type of change, and they don't. Oftentimes, they don't.
Wow.
I just resolved another case against this same complex recently. I can't go into the case
Yeah.
details, but a seven-figure result for another shooting that happened over there.
But the same place?
Same place. Yeah. That happened maybe 3 years later.
Wow.
So no changes. That guard gate is still gone. The cameras are still non-existent. The guardhouse is still abandoned. No security guard there. It's ridiculous. So it's unfortunate, but something's got to give. You would think when they're hit with these, you have to make these payouts, and their insurance company pays this money, then they have a higher premium that perhaps they'll do something. But I realize that a lot of these places that are just run down, they're comprised of a board oftentimes for people who don't even live in the community. They're just investors, right? They go into these poor neighborhoods, they get on the board, they have board meetings on Zoom, they never step foot on the property, and they rent out these properties to other people. And sure, okay, we have to pay a little bit extra in insurance. That's fine. Are we going to implement substantial change? Not at all. It's unfortunate, but I'm just glad that we were able to get, some type of financial compensation for the family.
Would you say that a lot of these complexes that you just mentioned, like that are where people, apartment complexes, would you say that these are heavy Section 8 properties where they're
A
guaranteed their
lot,
money?
a
So
lot of,
so they know they're going to get paid hand over fist, and it's almost like that the car manufacturer has a defect. Well, what costs more, fixing the defect on all the cars, recalling them, or
exactly,
letting someone burn to death, basically?
exactly. You know, you must have read the memorandum from Bob Kelley.
No,
Is
I
that
didn't. I just
okay? Because that's literally the
okay.
formula of how they looked at in the book. That's what his book is
That was
about.
the book he wrote, right? That was the
That
book.
was the
Yeah.
book he
Okay.
wrote, the case against General Motors. But no, I think you hit it spot on. I think you're spot on. I think they just look at it as, okay, what will cost more, right?
Yeah.
We sure we'll pay a higher premium on insurance, or should we actually hire security guards that are going to cost money? Implement some type of real security apparatus. Hire some security consultant to do a vulnerability assessment of the property, or install cameras, or just pay extra in insurance. And I think they choose the latter, and it's unfortunate.
That's just crazy to me. I mean, looking right now. I mean, are you bringing on? You're still solo in your practice, correct?
I'm still solo, so I have my wife. Obviously, she just passed the bar. Well, not that
Congratulations,
obviously, just
Donna.
passed the bar, and she's going to be sworn in within the next 3 months. She
Okay.
has to take the MPRE, like this ethics exam, so she's going to be joining us. And I am
Okay.
also looking to bring on another associate within that same time frame, within the same 90 days. I'm hiring another paralegal on Monday. He's going to start
Oh,
with us.
okay.
Yep.
So folks, if you're who are you? What is the perfect candidate for your office for this new potential attorney?
Yeah, I mean, someone with a couple years of experience, maybe 2 to 3 years of experience. It could be with personal injury, it could be insurance defense, but certainly someone with some type of experience. A great writer would be a great asset to have. Someone's good at writing. Someone who would love to take depositions or defend depositions, and write motions, respond to motions. Um, Someone who's a grinder, someone who wants to bring in cases, who bring in business, someone who is I just want someone who loves to grind, who loves to grind. All right. I was bringing in a lot of business at my last firm. I can't expect everyone to be like that, same way I was, because you got, like John Morgan says, you have like grinders, minders, and finders. So not everyone is all three. But if they are, I mean, I would love to have them.
Looking back at when you got that first case at the Publix, when you look back, did you think for a second, man, it can't be this easy?
Listen.
It can't be this easy, because you are skilled at this. I know people there, like, you are
Yep.
a rainmaker,
No,
and people
thank
don't
you.
get that rainmaking is hard.
It's a skill.
Yeah, you don't just, you have the people that will do the work for you, but if you don't bring that case, there's no work to be done.
There's no work to be done. It's funny you say that. You said, "Did I think it was going to be that easy?" Yeah, I did. I was like, wait a minute, this is amazing. So I thought every month maybe, or I would have, multi-million-dollar cases, right? I had not realized that I had struck the perfect combination of factors at the time, right? Because I think a month later, I got another case, a wrongful death case where someone was killed in a car accident, right? Then I signed them up, and I'm like, oh my God, this is another one? It turned out that there was no insurance, no car insurance. Or you'll get a case with $20 million in car insurance, but the injuries are not significant or not injured at all. Yeah. So I was totally oblivious to the fact of how lucky I was in that situation, to be at the right time at the right place for the right case. But obviously, since then, I've gotten numerous cases that had those combination of factors. Cases against rideshare companies where someone was tragically killed. Cases against workers who are working for a company who have 7 figures in insurance, who broke someone's neck and he ultimately died. I've had negligent security cases where people are killed and there's multi-million dollars of insurance. So I've certainly gotten those cases, but it's not as easy as you're walking through Publix in your first day on the job and someone just hands you a case like that. So I thought it would continue to be like that, but it certainly was not.
I don't want to say what are the worst cases. Obviously, the worst case is when there's no insurance, but when you're dealing with a massive injury and there happens to be that it's a police officer or a fire truck or something within the municipality.
Yeah.
Or I know you had a case with the Hard Rock, and they have caps.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that as an attorney, do you think that's fair? Should that be adjusted?
It should be adjusted. You have to understand. So there are certain caps there's a cap on damages for how much you can sue a governmental entity for, right? And in Florida, it's $200,000 for one individual. If someone dies and they have like multiple survivors, then the cap is adjusted to $300,000. I mean, that number has been there for years. I mean, maybe it was 300,000 was a lot of, or 200,000 was a lot of money in like 1990, but we're in 2025 now. In some states, for example, the sovereign immunity cap in Georgia is $1 million, right? So at least it's a little more fair in other states, but in Florida they have it on the books at this number, and it's just not right. It's just not right, especially when you're going after, let's say the police officer is speeding, let's say he's drunk driving and he kills an entire family of 5 people. That entire family of 5 people who died, their relatives have to split $300,000. That's just not right. And a lot of lawyers shy away from those cases because the government created that cap, and they also created a cap on the attorney's fees, right? So typically, when you go to trial, a lawyer can get up to 40% of the fees because, 40% attorney fees, 40% of the actual judgment.
Yeah,
it's reduced in sovereign cases to only 25%. So a lot of lawyers say, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Because it just doesn't make sense, because you can spend so much time and money and resources on an extremely complicated case when you're taking your time away from other cases, yet those other cases would pay out more for your firm than this one case where you're limited at 25,000 of 200,000, right?
When you mentioned that, as people may know, I am the VP of Strategic Partnership for Synergy, and I deal with lien and medical bill resolution. I have worked with Josiah on a number of cases, and he's introduced me to many, many attorneys who I also work with today. So I say thank you again for that.
Of course.
When you're looking at, when I've talked to these other attorneys, a lot of times they'll say that it's even harder than a regular case because these municipalities will fight every nickel. Like, do you find that to be the case as well?
Absolutely, because here's the incentive. When you're going up against these other big companies and insurance companies, there's an incentive for them to pay out when they realize they should, and it's in their best interest, and it's the right thing to do. Because the threat that they have against them is that if Josiah takes this case to a trial, that policy limit is no longer on the table. Now I'm going to go for more. So they literally should have paid $1 million when they had the chance, and a jury awards $10 million. Now they got to pay the full $10 million. But what happens when you're suing the city of Fort Lauderdale, for example, and they should have paid out $200,000 2 years ago? You go to a jury, you get a verdict of $10 million. Guess what? The law says they have to pay out
$200,000.
$200,000. So they can literally sit on their hands, do nothing, and the cap you can get, is the most amount of money you can get, is still $200,000. So they have no genuine incentive to negotiate in good faith. So that's why they, like you said, they just will penny pinch and offer you pennies on the dollar, and it's a shame. Those laws need to be adjusted.
Is the only way you can get around that when you then have to go to the state, which is
you have to go to the Republican government who believes in tort reform, who doesn't believe that clients or plaintiffs should really be entitled to much money. You would have to file a claims bill with the legislator and have that thing signed off by Governor DeSantis or whoever it is in office. And oftentimes that's just not going to happen. So, I mean, only in the most egregious of circumstances do they really sign off on that. So, and that process can take, 5-10 years even, right? So it's an unfortunate situation. We have to change the laws when it comes to caps on damages and on sovereign immunity.
I know there's some things that are changing this year, correct? Or about to go into play from last year?
Yep.
Anything that people should know?
Absolutely. So obviously we know about the tort reform that was passed on March of 2023, where this new statute of limitations went down from 4 years from bringing a claim to 2 years. We learned about how the bad guy can be on the verdict form and, negligent security cases. We know about the damages. Now we can't board the damages in a trial for what was billed in the hospital, but only what health insurance paid for. We learned all those things, but now there's a new change that went into effect on January 1st. It's mainly the procedural issues, so civil procedure. So now, lawyers must meet and confer and, discuss motions before you set it, right? So little things like that. Issues as far as motions for summary judgment, the timing of filing them, whether or not you can file them in the first place, what must be alleged in the motion for summary judgment, mandatory disclosures. Usually you would have to wait to get certain discovery from a plaintiff, like you have to actually request it and then you get it. But now when you file a lawsuit, a plaintiff lawyer must look for all these documents and everything and disclose it up front. So there's a lot of things you have to be aware of when filing claims in 2025.
So that's more lawyer procedure than it is.
That's more lawyer procedure than it really affects the average person. It's not going to affect, the timeline or it's not going to affect whether or not they have a claim or not. It's just what lawyers must be aware of and what their paralegals and themselves must be doing on every single case now.
Okay. So I want to finish with this, and I appreciate again your time so much. We have obviously tragedy going on right now in Los Angeles, and you have these fires that are decimating. I mean, gosh, there's areas that are disappearing in LA. I mean, Malibu, Pacific Palisades. I mean, they're the two major ones. As this is obviously an act of Mother Nature, But there was also something that came up that I read that there was a major decrease in budget of the fire department by the mayor of LA County or LA or whatever. What is the city? Is the county can the county be considered responsible if that was in Florida, for example, that they're reducing budget and now half your so much of your city's burning down and people are dying?
That's a great question. So I'm not sure of the laws in California, but certainly if that was in Florida, could you have a claim against the county? No. So there's, like we talked about, sovereign immunity and what you could sue a governmental agency for. First of all, if you're able to sue a governmental agency, the most you can get in Florida is $300,000. So all of these people would have to technically split $300,000 if you were able to even prove that they were negligent, right? But there's another level that we didn't even talk about first in sovereign immunity. Certain things the government is completely immune from, right? In Florida, there are certain decisions that they have the complete discretion to make. So there's something called operational versus planning decisions, right? So if a governmental agency is negligent in carrying out something that they are already doing, then you can sue them for that. But you cannot sue them for something that they made a decision not to do. So if they made an intentional decision not to fund certain things, you can't sue them for that. Here's an example I like to give. You can't sue the city of Miami for not having proper lighting on like the certain street, right? That leads to a car accident. You can sue them for not having lighting on that street. You can sue them for having light poles that have all their lights burned out because they made a decision to put the lights there, but they were negligent in the way they operated them. But you can't force them to actually put them there in the first place. So going back to the California analysis, if this happened in Florida, there would be no argument to say we could have made them, fund the fire department or whatever, fund XYZ appropriately. So if it happened in Florida, no.
Yeah, it's definitely a tragedy, man.
No, it's a tragedy, and certainly, my prayers are out to. I got a lot of friends out there. I filmed out there. I check on a lot of my buddies out there. Thank God they're fine. But man, it's sad to see, the complete devastation.
Yeah, my cousin lives right there in the valley in Sherman Oaks, and thankfully they have contained fires, and there's nothing hitting her right now. But It's been real bad. But Josiah, I appreciate you, man. Let people know where they can find you. I'm going to have everything in the description, but let everyone know where they can find you on your social media, your office number, all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
You want to reach out to Josiah Graham. He covers the entire state of Florida.
Absolutely. All throughout the state of Florida, man. So I'm on Instagram at Attorney Josiah, Facebook, Josiah Daniel Graham. You can reach my office. It's 954-450-4848. My website is grahaminjuryfirm.com. And yeah, man, I'm willing to help anyone who needs help.
Again, thank you, Josiah. This is our first legal legend.
I appreciate
Legal
it,
Legends podcast. Folks,
he
might be only 9 years in, 10 years on March 23rd.
March 23rd.
March 23rd. No, so now he can be considered officially old.
Exactly.
But this Josiah is going to be making his mark and will be making his mark for years to come. I'm sure at some point he's going to be president of multiple organizations. Again, he's an incredible connector of people. So if you have a situation that's not an injury case, he probably knows someone who can handle your case. Whether
I certainly will.
Corporate law, criminal law.
Exactly.
He knows somebody. I know a guy who knows a guy.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Josiah. Everyone, this is the first edition of Legal Legends podcast. Again, it's been an honor. Thank you, Josiah.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate you,
we will
brother.
see you again, folks. Thank you.
Yes, sir.